I'm Matt Gishard, and this is No Holds Barred. Today, I want to talk about the felony murder rule and how it relates to murder here in the state of California. What I want to read to you is from the California Penal Code Section 187. I'm just going to read a little bit of it, and it is murder defined. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought. It goes on and explains some other things. It talks about first-degree murder, second-degree murder, the felony murder rule. But in particular, I wanted you to hear that, the killing of a human being with malice aforethought. A first-degree murder in California is defined in a certain way, but there are several categories of murder that can be characterized as first-degree. And some of them are a killing in the commission of certain defined crimes. And we think of a rape, a robbery, a kidnapping, an arson, and a number of others can lead to, by definition, a first-degree murder. And what often happens is people don't appreciate when they've committed a first-degree murder in what we call a felony murder situation. Felony murder means they commit some other act which then results in a death. And there's, well, goodness, I didn't mean to kill anyone. I was only the rapist, the robber, the murderer, the arsonist, the kidnapper. I didn't. Let's talk about a case that happened in a town in California. And in that case, an individual went into a hardware store, picked up a pretty expensive piece of equipment, and tried to go out the back way on the business. That individual was confronted by store security. And we don't think anymore about store security as being someone with a gun on his or her hip. We think of just simply a loss prevention person saying, hey, wait a minute, you didn't pay for that, you can't go. In that particular case, in the state of California, with some rules that we have, Prop 57, that could be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending upon the value of that piece of equipment. But let's assume for the minute it was maybe a $400 piece of equipment, and therefore it would be characterized as a misdemeanor, a petty theft. Or, and it was a female, or if she entered that hardware store with the intent to commit the theft, then that's a burglary. Entry with the intent to commit theft, that's a burglary. Could be a commercial burglary of the first degree or the second degree, could be a second degree, or it could be a misdemeanor. So the petty theft or the burglary could be misdemeanors. However, when she was confronted by the loss prevention person, she pulled out a gun and shot and killed him. That becomes, at a minimum, a robbery. What is a robbery? That is taking the property of another with force or fear or violence or intimidation. Now, I do want to remind you that we've done a No Holds Barred show on robbery, and we've talked about some of the issues that relate to that. And recall that somebody goes into a store and steals a candy bar and walks out, and a loss prevention person confronts them in the parking lot, and there is a struggle, and the person gets away with the candy bar. That's no longer a petty theft of a candy bar. That's a robbery. Recall that from our previous scenarios. In this case, when she pulls out a gun, and this happened at a hardware store in Pleasanton, California, otherwise Not a lot of crime in Pleasanton, California, but she pulled out a gun and shot and killed that loss prevention person. If he had lived, that clearly, among other things, an assault and all that, but a robbery. She's using force to gain control and steal that piece of equipment. But she killed him. So the felony murder rule applies, that a person was killed during the commission of a felony. So she committed a robbery, a felony. That's not a misdemeanor, that's a felony. And somebody died. And somebody died purposefully. Now we all know the defense could be, well, I didn't mean to shoot the weapon. Well, in many cases, if you have a weapon, you appreciate that it has a bullet in it, that it can kill somebody. You brandish it or you point it at somebody and you say it accidentally went off. That can be a first-degree murder if there's no underlying felony. It can be a second-degree murder if there's no underlying felony. It depends on the circumstances. But in this case, pointing a gun at someone and threatening them with it, and the gun goes off and kills them, that is an inherently dangerous act, at a minimum, a second-degree murder. In this case, and I will tell you in the state of California, it is a felony murder, and she is responsible for that. Now, out in the car, in the parking lot, was her boyfriend. If the individual in the car, I call it the getaway driver, knew that she was going into that store to steal the toolbox or the piece of equipment, whatever, and he was facilitating that, he has equal responsibility for that. Now, the law's changed in California. We're saying that people who are in a situation like that, they can't be found guilty of murder. It used to be they could. I always used to teach this issue, and I would ask people, is it easier for one person to commit a crime or two people? And people would scratch their heads, and I say, well, think about it. Somebody wants to rob a bank. They park their car, they go into the bank, they rob the bank, they come out, they scratch their heads and say, shoot, where did I park the car? I forgot. Which, did I bring my wife's car? Did I bring my car? Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. I have a friend, parks out front, knows I'm going to go into the bank and rob, got the motor running, so when I finish robbing, I run out, I jump into the car, and off we go. So much easier to have that friend help me. That person is equally responsible for the crime, and that's the way the law always was in California. So what if the person goes into the store, you're there, she's only going to steal a toolbox or whatever. I didn't expect she was going to shoot anyone, so I shouldn't be responsible. Oh, okay, I helped her facilitate this crime of stealing the toolbox, but I didn't help her with murder. The law in California was, and still should be, that he is responsible for the murder. He helped facilitate that crime resulting in a murder. The felony murder rule applies. Now, I will say in California, we also have somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 special circumstances that in certain murders, if those special circumstances are proved, it can lead to the death penalty or life without possibility of parole. Many of those special circumstances are the same circumstances that make a crime a felony murder under the felony murder rule. But we have multiple homicides, rape, robbery, arson. You can't use the same crime to prove the felony murder rule and the special circumstance. But oftentimes we have somebody lying in wait is one of them, and that isn't a felony murder, but it is a special circumstance. So kind of the moral of the story is, don't take your gun in if you're going to steal something from a store, but clearly appreciate that if you cause harm to somebody when you're stealing something, it becomes a robbery, not a petty theft, not a burglary. And if you kill somebody, there's potentially the death penalty in the state of California that can apply. If you enjoyed this episode of No Holds Barred, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. It helps with our YouTube algorithm. And very important, please note below any questions or comments you might have about this particular episode.